Riftwalkers Radio is waiting for you.
Just step through the rift.
And discover a world of fantasy like you've never heard before. All right, so you want to design creatures, huh? Well, today we're going deep on creature design with some insights from a YouTube video by Sir Sketchy. It's called Deep Dive into Creature Design.
Cool.
Yeah. This is for anyone who's into world building, art, or just loves coming up with strange new life forms.
Awesome.
So you know how people always say to look at animals for inspiration? Well, Sir Sketchy says, go beyond the visual.
Interesting.
He actually used the example of an airplane.
What?
Like you could design a creature based on an airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be a being of metal and wires, almost like a Horizon Zero Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could take inspiration from the ailerons and create something really agile, maybe with wings, like the Legiana in Monster Hunter.
Oh, I see. So you're saying like one inspiration can lead to two totally different creatures.
Exactly. It's about seeing the potential in unexpected places,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is true for a lot of creative fields, really. Like, think about music. Nature has inspired so many composers.
That's true. You can practically hear bird songs in some classical pieces.
Yeah. It's all around us, just waiting to be discovered. But of course, inspiration is just the starting point, right?
Yeah.
Sir Sketchy also talks about the importance of the habitat,
Makes sense.
because the environment dictates so much about a creature's design.
Right.
You have to consider the limitations of the environment, both visual and biological. Like, why do so many deep-sea creatures have bioluminescence?
I don't know. Why?
It's not just to look cool. It helps them survive. It attracts prey in the dark.
Oh, that's right. It's an adaptation.
Exactly. And if you put a polar bear in the desert, it just wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't.
Right. You'd have to think about how a creature would survive in that environment, what it would eat, how it would move. Even for fantastical creatures, grounding them in reality is what makes them believable.
I agree. It's about creating a sense of authenticity, even when you're designing something that doesn't exist.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Sir Sketchy talks about thinking about creature biology, like in-game mechanics.
What does that mean? Like their strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah. Strengths, weaknesses, behaviors, even like what kind of loot it would drop in a game.
Huh. I've never thought about it like that.
It's a super unique way to approach design. So he uses his own creature design as an example. Its armor is made from catalyzed mucus.
Catalyzed mucus, like what is that?
Kind of like the Brachydios in Monster Hunter, actually. It basically licks itself, and the saliva hardens the mucus into armor.
Whoa, that's kind of gross, but also really cool.
And it gets even cooler. The scales are layered, like tree rings. You can tell how old the creature is by looking at its scales.
Oh, wow.
And it can shed its outer layer as a defense mechanism, like a gecko shedding its tail.
That's so cool. It's amazing how nature already has so many incredible solutions we can use for inspiration, huh?
Totally. But there's more to a creature than just its physical traits, right?
Right.
Sir Sketchy talks about behavior and personality, too. Because a creature is more than just a collection of body parts. It's a living thing with its own unique way of interacting with the world.
That's a good point.
He brings up stag beetles as an example.
Oh, I love stag beetles.
Yeah, they're often seen during storms, right?
Yeah.
So in some cultures, they're associated with thunder and rain.
I didn't know that.
And then there's salamanders. Sometimes they emerge from burning wood, so they're linked to fire.
Wow. It's fascinating how real-world behaviors can create myths and legends.
Yeah. And Sir Sketchy even gives his creature a personality. He describes it as crafty, calculating.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit mischievous even, like it sets traps for fun. These little details might seem insignificant, but they make a creature so much more memorable.
They make it feel more real, more relatable.
Exactly. And finally, he takes us through the process of translating all of this into a visual design.
Makes sense.
And he starts with the silhouette. It's that instantly recognizable outline that tells you everything you need to know about the creature at a glance.
Oh, right. Like when you see the shadow of a T-Rex, you know it's a predator even before you see the detail.
Exactly. And then there's shape language.
Shape language.
Yeah, it's the idea that different shapes have different meanings and emotions. So like triangles can suggest aggression, while circles might feel more friendly.
So it's not just about making the creature look cool. It's about consciously using shapes to communicate what that creature is all about.
Exactly. And of course, nobody gets it right on the first try. So Sketchy even shows us his initial design, which he calls the Lecheresin. Let's just say it wasn't his best work.
We've all been there.
He learns from it, though. He shows how he made improvements, iterating on the design.
That's good. So he refined the wings, gave the armor more detail, and he even added this really cool skull helmet made of bone fragments.
Oh, wow, like trophies.
Yeah, like the creatures adorn themselves with these fragments to show off, how good they are at hunting.
That's such a cool detail.
Yeah.
But speaking of, design pitfalls,
Yeah.
Sir Sketchy mentions a few common ones to watch out for.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
He starts with shrink wrapping.
Yeah.
I think we've all been guilty of this at some point. It's like when you draw the creature so thin that you can see every single muscle and bone.
Oh, yeah. It's like, where's the skin?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They end up looking more like skeletons than living beings.
Yeah, you got to give them some meat.
And then, the opposite problem is overdoing the muscles.
Right. It's easy to get carried away trying to make creatures look super strong, but then they end up looking, unrealistic.
Yeah, like every muscle is made of steel or something.
Yeah. And it actually makes them look less believable. It's almost like a cartoon.
Totally. It's like you can convey strength through other means, like posture and proportions.
Exactly. Even that shape language we talked about.
Right. Like a gorilla looks powerful even when it's just sitting still.
Exactly. It's not just about bulging muscles.
Speaking of overdoing things, Sir Sketchy also talks about over-designing.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic. Too many spikes, too many colors.
Too many glowing bits. It's so tempting to just throw everything at the design and see what sticks.
I know, right? But sometimes less is more.
Yes, sometimes simplicity is way more effective.
He says sometimes a few well-placed details have a much bigger impact than, a creature that's covered in bells and whistles.
It's about making those details count.
And making sure they serve a purpose, right?
Right. And then he brings up diversity.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy to design the same types of creatures over and over again.
That's true. You got to shake things up a bit.
Yeah, like what makes a fictional world really feel alive?
Mm.
It's the variety of life forms.
Right. Think about a coral reef, for example. You've got all these crazy shapes and colors, different sizes, all living together.
So instead of just focusing on, fierce predators.
We should be thinking about all the different roles creatures play in an ecosystem.
Totally. And that means different body plans, sizes, shapes, personalities.
Absolutely. He says that, focusing on a single style can make a world feel less dynamic.
It's like if every song on an album sounded the same. You'd get bored pretty quickly.
Exactly. It needs that variety to keep things interesting.
Okay, and this is going to make you feel a lot better because Sir Sketchy also talks about something I struggle with a lot. The pressure to do everything alone.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to get stuck in that mindset.
Like I always feel like I have to figure everything out on my own.
But you don't. Sir Sketchy reminds us that it's okay to ask for help, to collaborate with other artists, to bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah, sometimes a first perspective is all you need.
And it's way more fun to work together.
It's like having a brainstorming buddy.
Exactly. Two heads are better than one.
But one thing I found really interesting was how he reframed these so-called pitfalls as potential stylistic choices.
Oh, yeah, that's a really important point. It's all about intentionality.
Can you elaborate on that?
Like something that might be considered a mistake in one context
Could actually be a deliberate choice in another.
Right. Like
Yeah.
that shrink-wrapped look we were talking about, it might not work for every creature, but in a world where, resources are scarce,
Yeah.
it could be a very deliberate choice to make the creatures look gaunt and starved.
Oh, I see. So it's all about intentionality and consistency.
Exactly. Like if you're going for a particular style, own it. Apply it consistently throughout your designs. It'll create a more cohesive aesthetic and make those mistakes feel like intentional choices.
That's so cool. It takes the pressure off trying to achieve some kind of perfect design. It allows you to experiment and develop your own style.
Totally. And I think that's what Sir Sketchy is all about, encouraging experimentation and creativity.
Now, I know he goes through his whole design process using a specific creature as an example. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So he starts by talking about his inspiration for this creature.
Uh-huh.
And it's actually a really cool blend of real world animals
All right.
and designs from video games.
Awesome.
He mentions being drawn to the Nargacuga and the Leshen from Monster Hunter.
Oh, I love the Nargacuga. It's like a ninja panther with swords for wings.
Yeah. It's so cool. And he really liked the Leshen's connection to nature, how it can control plants.
Oh, that's right.
But he doesn't just copy those designs. He takes inspiration from them and blends them with his own ideas to create something new.
So where does this creature live?
He places it in a coniferous forest,
Oh, cool.
which I think is a really smart choice because it's an environment we're all familiar with, but it still has a sense of mystery and wonder.
I can totally picture this creature lurking among the trees.
Right. So then he gets into the creature's biology.
Okay.
And this is where that whole biology as game mechanics thing comes into play.
Uh-huh.
He thinks about the creature's strengths, weaknesses, even its potential loot, imagining how those elements would function in a game or a story.
That's so cool.
So, for example, he talks about the creature's armor.
Which is made from that catalyzed mucus, right?
Yeah, like the brachydios. He really fleshes out this concept, explaining how the creature licks itself and the saliva hardens the mucus into, like, tough bark-like scales.
Wow.
He even describes how the scales are layered, like tree rings, revealing the creature's age.
That's such a cool detail. What about defense mechanisms?
Well, he mentions that the creature can, like, shed its outer layer of scales to escape danger.
Oh, like a gecko shedding its tail.
Exactly. It's amazing how he combines these, like, real-world concepts
With fantasy.
to create something so believable.
It really is, but it's not just about the physical aspects, right?
Right.
What really brings a creature to life is...
Its behavior.
and personality.
Exactly. So what kind of personality does he give this creature?
I don't know, tell me.
He describes it as crafty and calculating, a master of ambush.
Sounds scary.
But it also has this mischievous side. He says it enjoys setting traps for fun.
Oh, wow.
Almost like it's playing a game with its prey.
It's like what he was talking about with, real-world animal behavior, inspiring myths and legends. It's those little details that make a creature feel, like, real and relatable. So how does he translate all this into an actual visual design?
Well, he starts with the silhouette, of course.
Yeah.
You know how important that is. He talks about creating a strong, recognizable shape that immediately tells you something about the creature.
Yeah.
And he uses shape language to, communicate certain emotions and ideas through the design. And then he shows us the Lescheresen,
Oh, yeah.
that first attempt that wasn't quite there yet.
But the important thing is he didn't give up.
Exactly. He embraced the iterative process, refining the design, making the wings more aerodynamic, adding detail to the armor, and incorporating that cool spell helmet made of bone fragments.
That's right.
It's a good reminder that, like, good design takes time and effort.
And that skull helmet is a great example of how a small detail can add so much, like, depth to a creature.
Totally. It's not just a random adornment. It tells us something about the creature's behavior and culture.
It's all about those layers of detail building upon each element to create something truly unique and memorable.
Yeah. But I think the biggest takeaway from Sir Sketchy's video is that the most important thing is to just start creating. Don't let fear or perfectionism hold you back.
It's about embracing the journey, the experimentation, and the joy of bringing your own creatures to life.
Exactly. And that's what makes creature design so exciting. There are endless possibilities, and the only limit is your imagination.
This has been an amazing deep dive so far. We've learned about finding inspiration in unexpected places, grounding our creatures in their environment,
Thinking about biology, like game mechanics.
and the importance of iteration and refinement.
But before we wrap things up, I think it would be great to take a moment to, like, reflect. What insights have resonated with you the most?
Yeah. What's really stuck with you from this exploration of creature design?
We'll be right back to summarize the key takeaways from Mr. Sketchy's video and leave you with a final thought to, like, inspire your own creative journey.
Man, I am so ready to start designing some creatures.
Yeah, it's really inspiring stuff.
So before we wrap up, maybe we could recap some of the key takeaways from this deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
The first thing that stuck with me was that inspiration can come from anywhere.
Right. Not just animals,
He encouraged us to look beyond the usual sources.
like sounds and movements, even words.
Exactly.
It's about seeing the potential in everything around us, really.
And that idea about thinking about creature biology like in-game mechanics.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
Such a cool way to think about a creature's strengths and weaknesses
Yeah.
and their role in the ecosystem.
It makes you think about the design from all these different angles, not just what it looks like, but how it would move and hunt and survive.
And I love that example of the creature with the armor made from, what was it, catalyzed mucus.
Yeah, like the brachydios.
It was such a creative concept, and it showed how you can blend real biology with imagination.
Totally. Like nature is full of amazing ideas.
We just have to figure out how to adapt them for our own creatures.
Right.
We also talked about behavior and personality.
Because those things really bring a creature to life.
Like, even if a creature doesn't talk,
They can still have a personality.
and that makes it more memorable and relatable.
Think about some of your favorite creatures from movies or games.
They all have those little quirks and motivations.
Exactly. They have character.
Sir Sketchy's creature. He described it as crafty and mischievous. It likes to set traps for fun.
It's those little details that make all the difference.
Oh, and Sir Sketchy also reminded us that design is a process.
It's okay to start with a rough idea and refine it over time.
Yeah, I really appreciated that he showed us his first attempt. The, what was it called?
The Lessurescent.
It wasn't perfect.
But he learned from it and made it better.
Which is so reassuring for those of us who, don't always get it right the first time.
Exactly. It's all about embracing those mistakes and learning from them.
And I think the most important message was just to start creating.
Don't be afraid to experiment and try new things.
Don't let fear hold you back.
Just have fun and see what you can come up with.
So what kind of creature will you create?
What weird and wonderful being will you bring to life?
We can't wait to see what you come up with. Happy creating.